Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Deep Dive. We are so thrilled to have you joining us.
They really are. Thanks for tuning in.
So today our mission is to look really closely at a place that, it often gets romanticized as this mystical, untouched frontier. I'm talking about the high-altitude, cold desert of Ladakh, India.
Right. The roof of the world.
Exactly. But we aren't just here to marvel at the scenery. We have a pretty thick stack of sources to unpack today.
Yeah, it's a dense one.
It is. We're looking at a travel guide detailing 10 must-visit Buddhist monasteries, a cultural deep dive into the Changpa nomadic tribe, a comprehensive Wikipedia overview of Ladakhi culture, a targeted photography guide, and this is the big one, a highly detailed 2020 government report on the sustainability of tourism in Ladakh.
And it's a slightly contradictory stack of information, honestly. What we're really going to do today is synthesize all these diverse perspectives.
Yeah.
Because Ladakh is caught in this massive tension.
Yeah.
It is actively trying to balance explosive modern tourism with an incredibly ambitious goal. They want to become a completely carbon-neutral region.
Which is wild. Because on the surface, the sources paint this picture of ancient traditions and pristine landscapes. But when you cross-reference the travel guides with that 2020 sustainability report, a very real collision emerges.
It really does. You have fragile nomadic traditions just slamming right into modern over-tourism.
Okay, let's unpack this by looking at the physical and cultural landscape first. I was reading through the travel guide, and it really struck me how the local architecture, specifically the gompas or monasteries, it's not just about aesthetics.
No, not at all.
They read almost like spiritual fortresses designed to survive the elements.
That is a perfect way to frame it. They really are the architectural and spiritual anchors up there. They aren't just monuments sitting passively on a hill. They are living centers of community built to withstand a profoundly harsh climate.
I definitely noticed that. The guide highlights Fixie Monastery, which is the largest in central Ladakh. The engineers didn't just build a structure on the ground, they integrated a massive 14-meter-high statue of the Maitreya Buddha directly into the hillside itself.
The logistics of that are staggering.
Right. And then the source mentions Hemis Monastery, noting it's the wealthiest in the region, with roots stretching back to 1630 under King Sangjamgal.
And if we look a bit further back in the timeline to Lamayuru Monastery, you find some really fascinating layers of history. The sources note its origins actually predate Buddhism in the region.
Oh, right, the Bon religion.
Exactly. Lamayuru was initially a major center for Bon.
I saw that term in the Wikipedia overview, but it didn't go into massive detail. What exactly does that entail?
Bon is an indigenous pre-Buddhist spiritual tradition. It's deeply rooted in shamanism and animism. It focuses heavily on nature worship, appeasing local spirits, and rituals meant to harmonize human existence with the immediate, often unforgiving environment.
Makes sense for that landscape.
Completely. As Tibetan Buddhism swept through, Bon practices were largely absorbed or marginalized, but that deep reverence for the natural landscape stayed permanently etched into Ladakhi culture. It's fitting, too, because Lamayuru sits in a geography locals refer to as moonland.
Moonland.
Yeah, the erosion has created a terrain that literally looks like the cratered surface of the moon.
Wow. The integration of art and that harsh landscape is just everywhere in these sources. The travel guide spends a lot of time on Alki Monastery, built between the 11th and 13th centuries, focusing on its lavish woodwork and murals.
And Lakir Monastery, too.
Yes. Lakir boasts a 22-meter-high outdoor Buddha, just out there, braving the extreme weather. It really speaks to how the culture and the environment are inseparable.
And that inseparable nature extends directly into the broader cultural fabric. The local language, Ladakhi, often referred to as Bodhi in the sources, shares deep linguistic roots with neighboring Tibet.
Because of the trade routes, right?
Historically, yes. Ladakh was a massive crossroads for trade. But culturally, it leans heavily toward its Tibetan neighbors, shaped almost entirely by the altitude and the geography.
You can definitely see that geographical influence in the food. I'm always fascinated by what people eat to survive extreme conditions.
It's all about the calories.
It really is. The sources list common Tibetan staples like thupa, which is a hearty noodle soup, and sampa, a roasted barley flour. But then you get into the strictly Ladakhi dishes.
Like sky.
Yes, sky. It's this heavy soup pasta, absolutely loaded with root vegetables. And tutagi, a thick pasta dish made with leafy greens. I can only imagine the caloric shock of eating dense dough and root vegetables at 15,000 feet.
But you clearly need that kind of heavy calorie-dense fuel just to keep your body temperature up.
You absolutely do.
And those calories fuel some incredibly rigorous traditions. The cultural deep dive details the Cham mass dances. Monks perform these during major festivals like Hemistsetchu and Losar, which is the Tibetan New Year.
I read about those. They sound intense.
Yeah, they really are. These aren't simply festive dances for entertainment. They are complex, physically demanding spiritual narratives. The monks wear heavy, elaborate wooden masks and garments to depict the victory of good over evil. It's essentially a form of spiritual warfare and storytelling combined.
I was so relieved to read that there are concerted efforts to preserve all this. The Wikipedia article specifically highlights a man named Morup Namgyal. He spent a 30-year career at All India Radio in the town of Leh, dedicating his life to recording a vast archive of Ladakhi folk songs.
Which is incredible work.
Without that kind of deliberate archiving, so much oral history would just vanish.
Preservation is definitely the recurring theme of every source we have today, whether it's recording folk songs or protecting an entire way of life, which becomes incredibly apparent when we move away from the settled towns and head up into the higher altitudes.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's pivot to the Chanthang Plateau. The geographic data in the sources is wild. We are talking about an extreme environment with an average elevation of over 14,000 feet.
It's barely breathable up there.
And up here you find the Champa tribe. Now, I assume they were just wandering nomads, but the deep dive explains they practice something called transhumance.
Right, they aren't aimlessly wandering. Transhumance is a highly calculated seasonal migration between fixed summer and winter pastures. It is an ancient blueprint for survival. By constantly rotating their herds, they ensure they don't overgraze the incredibly sparse vegetation of the high desert.
And their entire economy revolves around the changra, or Pashmina goat. To survive winter temperatures that regularly plunge below negative 40 degrees Celsius, these goats grow a superfine undercoat.
Which is the soft gold.
Exactly. When spring finally arrives, the Changpa don't just run electric clippers over them. They meticulously comb out this underfleece by hand. It becomes the raw material for world-famous cashmere.
It is a painstaking, labor-intensive process, but while the Pashmina goats generate the hard currency, the sources emphasize that it's the yak that actually sustains their daily physical life.
The yak is remarkable.
It really is. It provides rich milk, which the Changpa churn into butter for their daily staple, gurgur cha, a salted butter tea.
Okay, I have to pause on the gurgur cha. I was reading about the preparation of this salted yak butter tea. I cannot imagine casually downing a mug of hot, salty butter on a normal afternoon.
Probably not the best casual drink, no.
But at that altitude, in that cold, it acts like high-altitude rocket fuel for the body.
Precisely. It provides immediate, necessary fat and warmth. Beyond the diet, the yak is indispensable for the camp itself. They use yak dung for fuel, which is a matter of life and death in a landscape where trees simply do not grow.
And the tents, too.
Right. The coarse outer hair of the yak is woven into their traditional tents called rebo, which are incredibly durable against the high-altitude winds.
It's the ultimate all-purpose utility animal. But the cultural text notes a fascinating religious dynamic here. It mentions the Changpa follow the Drukpa Kagyu sect of Tibetan Buddhism.